Oh, wait, I forgot that you have to wait to live stream it. Okay, it's loading. Okay,
Oh, wait, I forgot that you have to wait to live stream it. Okay. Oh, wait, I forgot.
Okay. I think we're live now. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna.
Okay, I forgot that you have to wait stream.
My name is Savannah.
I forgot. Okay.
And we are two of your organizers of Hack MIT 2020, and we're super excited to have you guys at our How to Hack panel. We hope that it'll be really useful for all of you. So basically the way this panel is going to work is we are going to start with all of our panelists introducing themselves, and then we're going to go into a panel where we will ask some questions that we've prepared, which hopefully are questions that you already have on your mind. So hopefully we'll be answering a lot of your questions, and if we have time at the end, we'll be taking questions from sli.do. So if you have questions that you don't see answered, make sure to go to sli.do and use our event code 12321 to enter in your questions. So just to start off, can all of our panelists introduce yourselves and tell us what hacking means to you? And I guess we can start with Anton.
Hey everyone, my name is Anton. I am currently a senior majoring in computer science. I think hacking to me, I attended my first hackathon back in high school, and I feel like back then, like the reason why I went was just because like one of my friends wanted to go, and then I think since then, like every hackathon I've been to, I think one of the largest reasons why is just I feel like it's a really good time to like spend with friends and also just like learn something new and build something cool. So yeah. And Claire, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'm Claire. I just graduated from my MEng, so I just finished my undergrad and master's at MIT. And to me, hacking is having fun while pushing yourself to learn something new. Why don't you go, Gary?
Cool. So, hey everyone, I'm a third-year undergraduate at MIT. I'm currently majoring in architecture with most of my software background in full stack development. I started hacking actually in college, so my freshman year, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But hacking to me just means that finding space to openly learn and experiment with new technologies, and that's really what it's all about for me. Why don't you go, Sherlyn?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sherlyn. I'm a third year now, majoring in computer science. And I've been hacking actually since like high school. I got interested in it as kind of a way to learn how to make like useful projects outside of, just like learning. And I think it's been a really great way to learn about like different fields of technology and basically get to meet a lot of new people that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Awesome. Now we have all panelists introducing themselves, and now we'll move on to our first question. So our first question is how you started hacking. To go more specific, we can have some descriptions on like when you first started hacking and how much coding experience did you have going into it? And how were you feeling when you first started your first hackathon?
I guess I can go first again. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like my first hackathon was back in high school, and that's because my friend basically like found like an event just online. It's like, oh, we should go. And I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't really know how to code at that point. Besides basically just like basic Python. And I think, yeah, we didn't really know what to expect. So I remember my friend brought like a huge suitcase full of like random stuff because he wasn't sure like where he's gonna sleep or anything. Yeah, so it was pretty exciting, especially since like the hackathon wasn't just for like students, but there were also like just like software engineers there too. And I think like over that weekend, we like learned a lot and also just got to like I think the first time the most cool thing was like not really working on a project ourselves, but just kind of seeing what everyone else was up to. Yeah.
My first hackathon was my freshman year of university. I had done like a computer science class in high school, but otherwise I didn't know how to do anything. So I just went with some more experienced friends and just kind of took in the environment, and I kind of just like followed a tutorial for the entirety of the event, but I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, so my first hackathon was actually Hack MIT 2018, my freshman year. I didn't really know what hackathon was, but the summer before, the organizing team was pubbing really hard to incoming students, and so I thought it was a really cool idea, and I just kind of hopped on the train. I didn't really have an idea going into it, right? I didn't know what a hackathon was at the time, but what really set the like the formation of my first project was a challenge that a sponsor offered. It was IBM at the time, and IBM was offering a challenge on like a solution to natural disaster evacuation. And so our team just kind of took that idea and ran with it. My experience wasn't, it was just limited to Codecademy, Codecademy, learning units. In HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But beyond that, I didn't really know what a framework was. I didn't know what an API was. And so a lot of the time, it was just me waiting on the help queue to get sponsors to come over and help debug. But yeah, we can go more into that.
Yeah, my first hackathon was, I think, like sophomore year of high school. I also was like barely into coding at the time. I hadn't even taken like APCS yet. So kind of similar to Gary, I had a little bit of Codecademy, HTML, JavaScript, let's go. But I think it went like pretty much okay, except for the fact that I also went in without a team. And it was like one of those hackathons that also had like adults. I decided to go because they were handing out free Raspberry Pis. But I was like super confused what was actually going on. But I think it was a really great opportunity overall, even if I like didn't know that much going in. I definitely learned a lot once it was over.
Very cool. The next question we have for you guys is, since you guys are talking about your first time hacking, we want to know, like, how did you come up with your idea? And is it okay if you go into the event not having one?
I think this depends a lot on your goals for the event. I think the main goals that people have going into a hackathon just learn, just meet new people, just make like compete to make some sort of like winning project, or just try to make like some specific project you're really interested in, or some combination of these. But I think it depends on your goals. If you want to make like a finished project you're really happy with, or like, be competitive, then I think it would really help you to have a project idea beforehand. But if you're just trying to learn or just trying to meet people more, I don't think you need to stress out about it too much. But I'm happy to hear what others think as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I had like no idea what like the hackathon was about. Like, I think the first hackathon that I went to was like an IoT specific hackathon, and I had no experience in it whatsoever. So I think like one thing that really helped me was like team formation. I ended up forming a team with like I think like two college people who like pitched their idea, and I thought they were like the coolest people ever because they were so passionate about it, and it ended up like working out really well because I think our like personalities kind of just complemented each other's. So I'd say like definitely be open to anything, even if you like don't have an idea going in, because there's often a lot of people with ideas who are looking for people to help out.
I'd like to iterate on going in without having an idea. Like I definitely didn't, and for many of the hackathons I went to after my first, I also didn't have ideas. It was more so like it was building on my perspective of what hacking means, and it was just to like experiment within a sandbox environment. And so that's really what I did. Ideas often came midway through the hackathon, so we would start from scratch or like build a new app, or like it would be based on sponsor challenges to try and win a prize, or just like hearing out like Sherilyn mentioned, a pitch at the beginning of the hackathon. So it's very flexible, be open-minded. You don't have to have an idea, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, and I think for me too, like in like my first or like decent amount of like hackathons I've been to, like not only have I like not gone in with idea, but also like sometimes like you switch ideas like multiple times like throughout the like weekend, which I think is also like perfectly fine. Like I think like one of the most fun parts about like hackathons is kind of like brainstorming with your team to like try to think of something cool to make. So yeah, I just to reiterate what people have said already, like don't feel like you have to like go in with an idea or anything.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next question. I know that Sherlyn has already like briefly mentioned this, but a lot of our Hack MIT participants are beginner that didn't necessarily came in with the team. So if you have like any relevant experience, would you mind describing how did you meet your first hack teammates, and how did your team form?
Yeah, I guess I could kind of elaborate on that experience that I mentioned earlier. But it was my first hackathon and I went in solo, so it was definitely a pretty scary experience at the beginning. But I think like what helped me was talking to like a couple different people about their ideas and like what they were looking for. And I knew like what I could contribute was more like web dev experience. So I wanted to find a team that kind of covered other bases. So the team that I ended up joining had like kind of a hardware person. And so we got to like work on different parts of the project. And we also had like one person who was really good at pitching. So that ended up working really well. But I think definitely like go out and meet as many people as possible.
Okay, I'll take on this question. So my first hackathon, I actually had two teammates to go in with. I was fortunate enough to kind of convince some of my friends to join a Hack MIT with me. But that was just because I wasn't sure what to expect, right? It wasn't because like we had an idea. It was more so just to have fun and learn. In hackathons after where I went solo, oftentimes I went in with an idea of what I wanted to work on. And so that left other roles on the team for like for example, I'm primarily am a full stack developer, and so I try to look for someone who's good with the back end or someone who's interested in machine learning, or just someone who wants to learn, and then we can just come together and then brainstorm that way. But having diversity on your team definitely helps in team formation. Or if you're just a beginner and you just want to learn, then look for other people who also want to learn with you. That way, if once someone learns something new, it would be really cool if you showed the rest of the group, and then you guys get something out of it.
I guess yeah, so my first hackathon I went in like with someone I knew from high school, but there was one time like where I did just go to like a hackathon solo, and I actually like originally wasn't even like planning to like be on a team. Like I was just like sitting there, and then like some people just came by and was like, do you want to be on our team? And I was like, sure. I think that ended up being like a really fun weekend. So I think Gary mentioned this earlier, but like at hackathons, like being open is pretty like being open to just like working with like random people and things like that can be surprisingly fun.
Okay, awesome. So something that some of our hackers are asking now is once you've like arrived or like logged onto your hackathon in our case and you have your team and you have your idea, how do you get started on actually building it? So how do you like plan out your project from the creation of an idea to actually like finishing building it?
I think having I guess the first thing that you want to do is decide, okay, we have an idea, what like technologies are we going to use? And I guess we'll talk a bit later about that. But I think you should choose whatever technologies that you want to use, or explore different ones and choose the technologies you want to use. And then once you have that, narrow down to a minimum viable product, decide who's going to do what, and then execute on like a super simple thing that works before you get too ambitious.
Yeah, I'd like to take a double hit with that MVP, the minimum viable product. And I would I would go as far as to recommend having multiple minimum viable products with like, I guess you can say checkpoints in between. So every time you want to add a feature, make sure like that's what you want to present if all else fails. And the idea is that at least, by the end of the hackathon event, you will have something to showcase to the judge. Um, and setting that from the beginning with your team is very important. Even if it's just you guys wanting to learn and experiment, adding feature by feature can sometimes break everything you've done up to that point. And so it's really important that you have that in place. As far as like how to actually build it, oftentimes it's being familiar with the technologies, and if you're not, just reaching out for help, whether that be to other hackers who are willing to have some time to spare within their Slack, or help within the help queue, and with mentors being available to float around and show you a few pointers. But yeah.
Oh, I guess.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Shirley. No, go ahead.
I was gonna go with a little like a counter perspective to that. I think it's really hard to plan out exactly like what you'll be able to do at a hackathon, because it's very hard to predict like, oh, like I'll have this feature done in 2 hours. And actually one of my best hackathons where I won a prize, I ended up throwing out my entire idea at 3 a.m. when it was due at 8 a.m. and they still ended up finishing the project. So I would say like definitely be open to like changing, the path that your project is taking. Maybe you started off with like some kind of app, and then you want to change it to like have a different feature that targets like a different audience. That's definitely something you should be open to.
Yeah, I guess just some specific things. Like I feel like at least for me, like usually like after my team has thought of an idea, we usually just kind of create like a Google Doc and then just put like a to-do list, I guess, of like all the features we want. And I guess that's like a specific way you could like organize that. I would also say sometimes it might be hard to kind of split up the work well, like like perfectly among like all the team members. So I think like another good idea is kind of, especially at the start, to just like all be around like the same laptop and just like watch one person code, and then that way like I think that's also pretty fun, and then everyone's kind of like on the same page.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next question. So during a hackathon, oftentimes we have to seek external sources for help. So do you have any advice on how to best learn something in short amount of time, or do you have tips on what to Google, or how do you find out what technologies are the best to use?
Oh, go ahead, Anton.
Oh, sorry, you can go first.
Okay. Let's see. I think you want something that you can I think probably something that you can get help with. So what the mentors have experience in, I've been to hackathons as a mentor where there's questions piling up on the queue, but none of the mentors are really familiar with the technology, so they can't help that person. Or, you can muddle along, but it can be tricky. So I think choosing like popular, well-maintained like technologies with good communities is important. I guess it's hard to know that by just looking at a project, but maybe things like, if you look up the ranking of like most popular, like, I don't know, hardware programming, you'd be like, oh, Arduino, okay, easy. Or like, oh, most popular web framework, I don't know what that is these days. Or like a programming language that's still fairly popular that a lot of people would know. And choose something like that. And you can also look at, for some sort of like library, you can see if it has a very detailed documentation, or if there's a lot of issues or pull requests that seem like they have recent traffic on them, or like GitHub stars maybe as can tell you how many people know this thing before you decide to commit to some obscure library that people might not be able to help you with.
Yeah, I would say also, yeah, that's a good point, because also ideally like everyone on your team is like somewhat familiar with the framework you guys choose. I'd say one thing is I feel like there are some cases where maybe you want to like refresh your knowledge about something, or you kind of know something tangential, like maybe you know JavaScript, but you want to learn React. I think for those cases, I think like, yeah, Code Academy has been mentioned already. I think just like spending like the first 2 or 3 hours just like going through the entire Code Academy tutorial could be pretty useful. I think for other things, online tutorials are, I feel like I like them more than kind of just straight up like reading documentation, because it's like easier to get something working. And I feel like especially at a hackathon, because there's not that much time, you don't really have to feel like you understand everything you're doing. As long as it works, it's kind of fine. And then you can, yeah, just keep going. So
Yeah, I'd say like to be productive like quickly at your first hackathon, it might help to try to build something that has like really like based off like really good API docs. So like if there's a sponsor at the hackathon, it might like help to use like APIs because they're familiar with their own API and you can ask them for help, or try to look for tutorials or like things that have implemented that API already, so you can kind of see how it's been used in the past. So you don't have to like read through so many docs on your very first hackathon, because that's kind of a lot of time gone down just reading docs. It's better to hack away as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm much less of a Googler when it comes to hackathons, and I'm much more of a YouTuber. And I just bump up the speed, because if I can find like a library or a framework where a well-known YouTuber has gone through tutorials for, then I would rather just watch them, you know, set it up and then like do some example projects with it and just copy that. And then if it, you know, if it's something that a mentor is familiar with, then, you know, that's bonus points. But if speed is yours, really your like is what you're just trying to set up your project as soon as possible, then YouTube is definitely my way of going about it. And also like how you learn new technologies. I will say these are for like more general technologies out there, but if it's like an API specific to a sponsor, then just ask the sponsor because they're there to help you. I know there are some sponsors at this weekend that will do that and have specific challenges for it. So just hit them up and they'll have someone to help you out.
That's so interesting. I've never looked at a coding YouTube tutorial before, but it seems really helpful.
I'm quite shocked. I've always done that. Yeah, like Traversing
Wow.
Media or like, you know,
Whoa.
yeah, just a lot of these channels that does a lot of do a lot of tutorials, and I just follow them.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you guys will have lots of ways to get help, whether it's searching for it on your own or asking our mentors and sponsors at the event. So our next question is about how you actually like structure your time during the hackathon. So maybe if you guys can talk about how you divided your work among your team and what you did over the course of the 24 or 36 hours. And also one thing that a lot of people are asking is like, did you sleep and how much did you sleep? So maybe if that was part of your time at the hackathon, also mention that.
Sleep if you want to sleep, but probably sleep. There's no kind of should or have to or expectation. I was looking at these questions. There's a lot of like, oh, should I, like, do I have to do this? There's no one stopping you from doing anything you want to over the 36 hours.
I would say that if you're the kind of person who doesn't function on like no sleep, like me, I would recommend getting at least some sleep. Like at least for me, I always try to take a nap at least right before I present so that I'm not presenting with like dead inside. Yeah, and like sometimes like it helps to take a break and like take a nap. So if you're like stuck on something, it like processes while you're sleeping, and you might have a breakthrough when you wake up.
I mean, the only thing that matters is what you personally get out of it. Sorry, I'm jumping in again. You don't have to like make even a competitive project if you don't want to, or yeah, anyway. Do whatever you want to do, what makes you happiest, what you will get the most out of it.
So in my experience, every time I've gone to a hackathon wanting to, like planning to not sleep, I always end up crashing around 3 or 4 a.m. just because like it takes a lot out of you to learn that much in a short period of time and then also build a project out of it. Um, so I would say like plan to sleep, but there are, sometimes when you're just grinding away, you're just coding away, and then you come up with this really cool idea and you're being really productive and you just don't sleep. Right. And like in those instances, if you want to keep going, that's your call. But if your team goes to sleep, let them go to sleep. Like other than that, you can work out with your teammates. If you want, if you want to work the whole time, divide up like sleep slots for your team, and then that way you can have like one person up at all times making progress. um how do we structure our time? So in my experience, the best teams I've worked with uh have always structured the time based on the role that they play. And so me being the front end developer with one of my teammate being the back end or another teammate being the ML person, like I would work on the UI, the back end would work on the API, the ML would work on training the data, and at the end we just kind of like put all those together. um and that's generally how it's worked best. But if you're like a group of beginners, what I can imagine is that you send someone off to learn a technology and you send another person off to learn a different part of the project, like a different part of the stack, and then at the end you guys come together and put it together piece by piece. So just like that's how I would approach it. But just make sure to leave some time at the end because debugging is inevitable. Because you have to patch it together, right? Because if you do it too late, then you might not have a working product. And this goes back to having checkpoints between minimum viable products.
One thing, yeah, one other thing I just want to say about sleep is, at least for me personally, I feel like I'm actually like I'm definitely much more productive like at 3 a.m. like than I am like at 6 a.m. if I have slept for 3 hours. So I think like I guess like you can kind of try to time your sleep, I guess, based on when you like need to present and things like that. But I'd say like, for example, if you're like me, then like it might be, I don't know, better to like stay up later and then just like be asleep during your presentation, just let your teammates carry you or something.
As far as how teams work together, I advise all project teams to try to, as early as possible, agree upon an interface between each person's work. So if you want to reduce dependencies between each other's work, I love pair programming, but if you want to like work independently and then come back together, agree upon kind of how those pieces are going to mesh together. Like, oh, I'm on the back end side of this, and this is what I'm going to send to you, and this is what I expect to receive. And you say, oh, I'm on the front end of this. This is what I'm going to receive. This is what I'll send back. And then you can, by reducing the dependencies, you can then like kind of work in a decoupled way before you come back together. But again, like Gary said, don't underestimate how much time it takes to integrate things together.
Awesome. Moving on to the next question. So this year, Hack MIT is extended to 36 hours, and 36 hours could be quite a long time to stay focused and stay motivated. So do you have any tips on how to deal with frustration? And what do you turn to for inspiration when you're finding yourself stuck?
Yeah, I would say like take advantage of all the events that like the hackathon runs. Like some hackathons I bet you have run like super cool events, and Hack MIT is like really no different there. We have like a bunch of stuff that goes on at like, even late night. And I think like just like taking frequent breaks and just thinking about something helps, at least me personally, helps my creativity a lot. And also definitely take time to like, I guess it's much harder at a virtual hackathon, but in the future, even for like in-person hackathons, like drift around to other teams. Like sometimes you'll meet like really cool people doing like really cool things. And that's like one of the greatest moments, I think, greatest things that have gotten out of hackathons.
If something isn't fun or you're not enjoying it, you don't have to do it. Like you can just pivot your entire project or like throw this part of the code away and do something else. Like it's really what you want to get out of it. So don't feel like, oh, I'm going to get a bad grade if I don't do like a front end for my project. Like, oh no, it can just like be, like 5 lines. It doesn't. It's all what you want to spend your time on.
I think like similar advice for just like work in general also applies. I think like just taking breaks every once in a while and like rewarding yourself for like doing stuff. Like I always like just watching random YouTube videos every so often, like during hackathons, because I feel like yeah, it's just like I even do that too, like just normal work. But yeah, just like yeah, I don't feel like you have to like force yourself to like do 100% work all the time.
All right, cool. So our next question is about how you actually build something from scratch, because I think the task of having to build a website or an app from the beginning seems very daunting to a lot of people. So do you have any advice on how to do that?
Cool. So I'm a full stack developer, so I can definitely probably help with this one. So the first thing I would say is if your intention is to learn and you're like not sure where to start, then I would say jump in and learn a full stack framework. And I would recommend doing that through YouTube. But if you're someone like who's experienced and whose goal is just to get a product out there, then do with what you're work with what you're comfortable, whether that is a JavaScript framework you're already familiar with or with HTML, CSS. And then you can have a mentor or a teammate help you spice it up. But if your intention is to learn, then start with a framework, or actually start with HTML if you're not there yet. Start with HTML and then dive further into a framework, and then from there, you could like it's just a canvas that you can work, and you can do whatever you want with it. You could be adding features, API calls, like UI design. The world is endless once you get to that point. But the common convergence is definitely a technology.
Yeah, I think like I have kind of a similar experience as Gary, because I also started off mostly as like a full stack developer. And I remember at my very first hackathon, after the IIT one, because that was a bit weird, I essentially started with a to-do app in Angular, and I like chopped off all the pieces I didn't need, and I started adding the first thing I did was like hook in like a travel API that was what one of the sponsors was offering. And like once I could make like basic requests to the API, I tried to create like one page on the app that would like query data and display it. And I think like the nice thing about having like a framework, like I had like a to-do app to like start from, so I had something working and I could like start off like adding little features to it. Really helped me. But of course, this could definitely change based on like what text you're using.
I guess, yeah, I would also say, I guess, like, yeah, I agree that, like, I guess if you're like, if you haven't really worked with like websites at all before, I'd say definitely, yeah, learning HTML like through YouTube or Codecademy or anything is probably like a good start. And then I know we've also been like throwing around this word like framework a lot, but I personally like, it took me a while to like understand really like what an API or like what a framework, like what they are. So I think maybe if like you kind of, if you're the type of learner who kind of wants to like know how things work, like what they mean before actually doing it, maybe a good thing to do would just be to like search up just like what is an API and kind of just learn like conceptually what that means. And then as for framework, I think I personally feel like there like there's this framework called Flask, which is what you use with Python, and I just personally think that's probably the simplest framework to get started with for building a simple website. So like maybe after that you could search up like Python Flask tutorial and then kind of just copy that. But yeah.
Also, just throwing this out there, Facebook, one of our sponsors, is actually hosting a workshop on a framework, a JavaScript framework, on Saturday evening. So if you are interested in attending that, definitely keep an eye out for that.
we're also running a series of beginner workshops. We're teaching Flask and a bit of basic JavaScript, so you should definitely attend.
Awesome. So far we've been talking a lot about how to build a project, but once you finished your project and ready to present them, like how do you do a demo? How do you like approach doing a presentation to the judges?
I am going to be opinionated here and say I don't like, as a judge, seeing like slides usually. I really just want to see what you made. Like if you can just say without like a lot of like misdirection or or like caginess what you built, I'm very happy to hear that. Like I think I'm always so excited to see what students have learned, and it's like, I don't know, I think for me it's like a celebration of whatever you're able to do. Like I think a lot of students they feel embarrassed or ashamed somehow that they weren't able to do more than they did in that time. And then because of that, they like downplay it or talk about something else, when really I'm just really excited to see like, oh yeah, you know, each teammate did one thing and it didn't really come together in the end, but I want to hear like, you know, what each of those things does. I think that the judges just want to like, or at least when I'm a judge, I want to like, you know, hear what you did and some like of what you wanted it to be. But I think you don't have to be like afraid of judgment, but just kind of sincerely present your project.
I think in the pitching side, I guess just like start off with kind of the problem that you were trying to solve if you had a problem. But it doesn't need to be like a full like startup pitch. You don't need to be like, oh, this is our target customer. Like I think some people tend to overdo it and we're not looking to like invest in you or anything. So kind of keep it simple. Just like give us a background for like why and like the main things that you were trying to do in your app. And just go straight into a demo of the app. And I think like in terms of like live demoing, it's kind of a meme in the CS community that things tend to go bad during the demo. So I would say like don't be afraid to like mock out things if you need to. Like if there's something that isn't working 100% of the time, it's okay to tell the judge like, oh, we're still working this out. They understand that you've only had, you know, like 24, 36 hours to work on it. So you can put in like stand-in data and tell them like this would be replaced with an API or whatnot. Because the main thing is kind of just showing like the big picture of like what you were developing and highlight like the progress that you made so far.
Well said.
I think one thing I've noticed is like just like typically during hackathons, like during the like multiple judges will come to your table, and then like kind of after each one, your team kind of has like a more and more cohesive and like efficient presentation. And since like usually these like the judges are pretty limited on time, so definitely I think it's good to kind of run through your demo like beforehand with your team, like make sure you have like all the like whatever your project is like set up on your laptop, and make sure you know like how to quickly like reset it for the next judge and things like that, and then I think things will go smoother.
I won't elaborate much more on what the other panelists have said, but I would just add that like if you're trying to go for a challenge or a sponsor prize, then definitely address how your project like fits into that challenge, and then what solution is it trying to provide, what problem is it trying to solve. So if you have like some sort of narrative to your project, I think that also helps.
Okay, awesome. So those are all the questions that we've had prepared. So now we're taking some questions that we saw in the Slido. And one of the most popular questions is, this is my first hackathon and I'm kind of confused how a hackathon works. And basically this person wants to know, like, are there specific tasks, and like, are you coding an entire project from scratch? and just general questions about like, if we don't have any experience coding, how can we contribute or be a valuable member to the team?
Gary, you should answer this one.
Okay, so my sister is actually also a freshman in college, and she's just starting to get into hacking. And she asked me a lot of the same questions, and it took me a while to realize. But the first thing I'd like to get out of the way is that a hackathon has nothing to do with like hacking into a computer or like hacking to some sort of system. Like that was the misconception, especially for non-CS majors. So in this context, hacking just means using whatever resources you have at hand to put together some sort of product or an idea, just to like build out, just to like build out a solution or put together a little IoT device. It's nothing to do with what the traditional hacking in like media is. And how a hackathon works is that, right, you go in oftentimes with or without an idea, right? You find a team or you can go solo and you use the resources around you to flesh out that idea or to learn something new. But by the end of the weekend, you will have something to show, either for your own pride or for like for it to be judged. And the tasks are very flexible. It's hard to be specific about it because the tasks pertain to your project and how you want to build it out. So if you want to build out a full-on product, then your tasks are going to be like a long laundry list of these are what we need. But if it's just to learn, then like try something new at every point in time. And coding an entire project from scratch, I think most projects don't do that. From my experience, a lot of them build on templates that are available either through public GitHub repositories or YouTubers who have set up templates for you. But it's never really a project from scratch. It's something that like other people have open sourced, and then you can combine tidbits here and there to build out your idea. Yeah.
I would recommend as well that you are honest with, if you're going in for judging, to be honest about like what was given open source, like instead of saying like, oh yeah, like I invented Flask and I made this a web app, something like that. I think it's good to say like, oh yeah, we started with this template of a to-do list and then we added all these specific features for how it applies to this challenge or this area, and that's like really good thing. It's standing on the shoulders of giants and stuff.
Yeah, and I'd say like if you have like no idea where to start, attend workshops, because we like at hackathons generally, though there will be a wide variety of workshops, so you kind of get an idea of different technologies that you can use. And so at least it's like a starting point. So if you really like, say like React, and if you made like a to-do list app, you can start building on like, oh, what if we added like pictures from an API to each of like these to-dos? So just like start simple. Don't go in being like, oh, I need to make like a fully functional like Facebook clone or whatever. Just keep it simple. You don't have to like, push yourself too hard at your hackathon. Just go in with the mindset that you want to learn and make something simple.
I think that's a great point, Sherlyn. And maybe a specific path for someone who has never coded before and doesn't have an idea, doesn't have a team, would be like, go to the workshops, tech talks, whatever, find something that you're excited about and try it out with the help of the mentors at the event. And then along the way, maybe form a team. But I think that's a nice way to choose to have choices of things that are interesting that people at the event can also help you with.
I just wanted to like talk a bit. I really like Gary's kind of clarification of what hackathons are, because like, yeah, definitely it can be confusing, especially for your first time. I just want to elaborate a bit about like being resourceful with like the resources you have. I think like specifically like in the context of working on a software project, what I think that like one thing that means is, for example, taking like different open source like products or APIs that are already out there and kind of combining them in an interesting way. So for example, maybe like one sponsor has an API that lets you like gives you like some map, like Google Maps, and another one like lets you send text messages, and then you can kind of think about like how can I like put these together. So in that sense, it's like you're not building everything from scratch, but rather you're trying to like combine existing things. And then for like some people at hackathons also build hardware hacks, which have like a physical component. And for those, a lot of times I think people just kind of take whatever random utensils or like random boxes they can find like around the venue, or around your house if it's virtual now. And then, so like in that sense, it's kind of like the resourcefulness nature of the hackathon.
Awesome. So another popular question from the Slido is that if you have like a whole team being beginner, would you like, what project can they do with like no one having web or mobile app development related experience?
I think it's just like Sherlyn was saying, like, oh, try and go to a workshop if you're interested.
So with that being said, would you like recommend going to your first hackathon, being mixed in a group of different coders with like mixed level of experience, or would you recommend just go along with your beginner peers and just learn something?
I think it doesn't matter too much as long as these are people you like trust, I guess, to be good team members. If you can see yourself stuck in a virtual room with them for 24 hours and see yourself being productive, because it's really ultimately like a fun experience, and a good like team bonding experience. And really, like, I think if you work together well as a team, it doesn't matter what experience you have going in. You'll figure out a way to like make it work. And I think like once you like know what you want to do, it's easy to allocate tasks from there, and then everyone can focus on like what they need to learn from there. So I wouldn't say like to be too afraid of going in as an all beginner team. We do have a lot of resources available. And honestly, if you're just like completely stuck, like just stick yourself on the mentor queue, and it might help talking it out with like someone from the industry who can maybe point you in the right direction.
Okay, awesome. I think we have time for one more question. And one thing that people want to know is, what if you're too embarrassed to ask for help? Because you guys have talked a lot about getting help from mentors, but what if people are afraid to ask for it?
I think everyone has been a beginner before, and some people are farther away from that point. And sometimes I've had a hard time asking for help from people who feel like I feel like they've forgotten what it was like to be a beginner. But I think that anyone who comes to mentor an event like this really cares about helping students and remembers what it was like when they were just starting out, and they want to give a good experience to someone else. I think I think that no matter how simple you think your question is, the mentors will be so happy to encourage you along and like help you, not just with like, oh, I have some specific problem, but you can ask them like, oh, I'm having a hard time like deciding what my project will be, or like, oh, I'm having a hard time. You can ask them more general problems too, or general questions, and they're happy to help you with those as well.
Also, like, I think as a beginner, like, you just remember that the mentors have probably helped like a lot of other beginners before. So you're not probably the only one with a question. You're not going to seem dumb or anything. Everyone's been at that point before where we like didn't know what HTML was. We didn't know what a variable was even. So I think like we respect, like the mentors also respect that you're taking this effort to learn. And it's like, they're not going to personally judge you. It's just a learning experience for everyone. So just take it as a fun learning experience, because this is the best place to kind of fail if you need to.
Oh, no, Claire's point about how every expert was once a beginner really hits home. because that just reminded me of like, the first time I ever like asked the sponsor for help. I was also a little bit embarrassed, but as soon as I asked that first question and he gave me a response, I asked another question to follow up on it. And then from there, it was just a chain of questions that each time elaborated more on the details of what he was trying to say. Because experts or just even experienced developers oftentimes forget that terminologies aren't so familiar with people who are outside of the domain. Like I know we mentioned we're throwing around words like API or Flask or your frameworks, but at one point in time, none of us knew what those words meant. And then asking a question, starting from there, and then asking what it is a really good way to kind of get over your embarrassment, and from there just continue learning and exploring. So my advice would be just to ask the first question, and from there build off of it.
Yeah, and I also think, just like Sherlyn said, like one of the large goals of a hackathon is like to learn. So like definitely like don't feel like you're not supposed to be asking questions, because you are supposed to be asking questions. I think another thing I would say is like mentors are happy when they get the opportunity to like help. So like you can kind of think of it, if you're kind of embarrassed, as in like you're like helping this mentor, because you're like letting him like do mentoring. Yeah, and I think maybe like another tip, I guess, like I'm not sure how this works virtually, but at least in person, like oftentimes if your team has a question, you can just go as like an entire group to the mentor and ask them a question, and then maybe you'll feel more confident because you have more numbers. But yeah, it's supposed to be a learning experience, so questions are appreciated.
Okay, awesome. That is all the time that we have for our panel today. A huge thank you to our panelists for coming out and taking the time to speak to us and giving us all this advice. We really hope that all of you guys watching have been able to learn a lot from this panel, and you feel a little bit more confident going into Hack MIT 2020 this weekend. If you guys have any lingering questions that we didn't get to, especially about something like team formation or like the schedule and sponsor prizes, feel free to ask in the help channel in Slack. And also we'll have a website up on the day of the event where you guys will see all of the events. So stay tuned for that. And thank you everyone for watching. Yay.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Savannah.
Thank you.